I want to talk today about intimacy of our practice, how intimate this practice is. When I first started practicing with a group about 21 years ago, something I think, I didn't have any feel for that it would be intimate. In fact, if anything, I thought Zen was sort of a loner activity. I had sat by myself for a couple of years, and I would get up early in the morning, and at first the dogs would go crazy. They'd be like barking up, and so that didn't go over too well with the rest of my family, being awakened very early in the morning, 5 o'clock or whatever. And so I eventually found the only place the dogs didn't go nuts was to, and they weren't going to be let outside, they're going to be in the house, was to go into a shower stall. So I'd go into a shower stall, close the door. I didn't have a zafu, but I had no pillow, and I just sit on this pillow in the shower stall, and that's how I meditated. And so I didn't, at that time, I didn't really think of that as particularly intimate. Anyway, my first experience where I got a glimmer of the intimacy of practice of sitting with a group was in my first week-long sesshin. And in that first week-long sesshin, I got there at a time where I didn't have a chance to meet my roommate. And when I did see him for the first time, the sesshin had always started, and neither one of us said a word the entire week. I mean, I was so careful, and he was so careful about adhering to, absolutely no speaking of any kind. The only speaking either one of us do, because we talked about it later, was in Dokusan. Okay. And so, but what happened is after that was over, he came up to me after the week-long retreat was over, and he said, I don't know your name, got no clue where you're from. I don't know if you're from Colorado, someplace else. Don't know what you do for a living. I don't know anything about you, but you feel like a fast friend to me. I feel like I know you so well, like we're best buddies. That's pretty much a quote of what he said. And I felt the same way about him. And it's like, what is going on here? That's nothing like I expected. And it's not really what I felt when I was sitting in the shower stall for a couple of years, meditating by myself. So what was going on there? I want to share a koan with you that I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. It comes from the Book of Equanimity. It's case 20. And it's a conversation between Jizo and Hogun. And it goes like this. Jizo asks Hogun, where are you going? And Hogun says, on pilgrimage. And then Jizo says, what is the purpose of your pilgrimage? And Hogun says, I don't know. And then Jizo said, not knowing is most intimate. Not knowing is most intimate. Well, first of all, what about that question about what is the purpose of pilgrimage? What's being asked there? Well, metaphorically, that could be a question about what the heck's the meaning of life? What's going on here? What happens after we die? What happens before we were born? What would be a life well lived? How could we give our life more meaning or less meaning? Or does it even make any difference at all? All those kind of questions kind of wrapped up into that one, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of your pilgrimage, right? And what an answer. I don't know. I don't know, right? He didn't get into a conceptual thing about this. Just, I don't know. Just, I don't know. And then, of course, Jizo says, not knowing is most intimate. Not knowing is most intimate. But what is that intimacy they're talking about? And what is that don't know? I don't know. So again, where are you going? Around on pilgrimage. What's the purpose of pilgrimage? I don't know. And then not knowing is most intimate. So is this not knowing, is it just the opposite of knowing? I was on a business trip years ago, and we were in Seattle. We were having dinner at the top of the Space Needle. And for some reason, the question came up, how tall is the Space Needle? I said, I think it's 650 feet. I don't know, I just took a stab. And other people took a stab as well. Nobody got it right. So somebody Googled it or something and told us the answer was, I think it was 605 feet or something. And I'm thinking, as I read this going, is that what Jizo's talking about? Is that the most intimate kind of thing, that not knowing, that opposite? Maybe we could call that opposite of knowing. didn't feel intimate to me at all. Just was just what it was. So what's going on here? Because he's pointing at something, and he's pointing at something that's deeper than that and much more intimate at that, and a real key point of our practice. In fact, it's not separable from our practice. It is our practice. Okay. So I'd like to just do a little exercise. I had a background in science, did a lot of experiments one time 100 years ago. And so let's do a little investigation. And let's do this investigation. I'd like you to be coming from a place of not knowing as we're doing this, not holding on to a lot of concepts. No, we can't do any talking. We can't do any illustrations really much at all if we don't have some kind of lightly grasped views and concepts. So bear with me. You're going to hear me introduce concepts. I don't know what else to do. Category Gary Roshi wrote a book called "You Have to Say Something." So if it was good enough for him, I'm gonna say something as well. But it would be better if I didn't say anything. Too late for that now. Anyway, look at what I got here. You know, this it looks like a pen to me, and it does. It manifests as a pen. This is a pen. Let's not overthink that. Okay, but let's investigate this pen a little bit. Let's investigate this pen. Like when I got this pen, I got it to write some notes. Look at some scrawling here. I've got some scrawling here on these sheets. Are you kidding me? Think I can even read what any of that is? Heck no, I can't. But anyway, I was trying. So anyway, and I needed a pen to do that. But when I got this pen, can it really write? Here's the pen. Okay, I'd like to give a talk on get this down. I want to talk about intimacy in our practice. Come on now. But okay. Intimacy in our practice. You can see I wrote the word intimacy right there. Sorry, it's probably all backward on Zoom, but you can figure it out. Intimacy. So it could do it, but it can't do it by itself. It can't do it alone. It's in relationship with me. And we're going to see it's a pretty dang intimate relationship. It can't do its job of writing things, if we think that's what its job is, maybe it's not, without me picking it up and helping it and being in relationship with it. Okay. But let's look at some other things that this pen taught me. Okay. I love this pen, by the way. And let's look at what it can do. Now watch carefully. This pen can rotate. It can just rotate. Isn't that kind of amazing? It can rotate. Okay. Now you say, well, no, these things here, they're doing the rotating. It's not the pen. You sure about that? Just let go of your concepts for a second. Let's do this. Let's say I'm going to ask the pen to rotate right now. Keep rotating. Keep rotating, pen. And the pen is rotating. I see the word Sharpie going around. And these things are moving too. Let's try it a different way. Let's have these things, thumb and forefinger, let's have them initiate the rotation, we think. Go. Looks pretty much the same to me, right? If I'm really coming from not knowing, what's the difference? And when supposedly these fingers stop, let's say that they're doing the movement, the pen stops again. So one more time, from the pen's perspective, the rotation begins, the fingers go right along with it, right in sync. Started instantaneously, as far as I can tell, with when the pen started rotating, and then they stopped. Right? So what's that all about? Let's see what else this pen did. This pen said that it likes to have some variety in its life besides just writing things. So what else it can do? It can lift up my hand and then bring it back down. Right? Look at that. It goes up and then it goes back down. And what's really cool that it can do, let's do this. Let's put it in this hand. The hand can still go up and down. And the pen's making it do that, going up and down, right? Okay, so let's kind of just let go of our thoughts about how these things work, because our thoughts aren't going to hold up. And you begin to see that certainly in sitting, right? They're oversimplifications. They're taking a completely dynamic world, ever-changing, impermanent, nothing fixed, including yourself, including this moment, nothing fixed at all. And you're trying to tell me that, oh no, what really happens is these fingers do it. They don't look that smart to me. Maybe they are. It's just a concept I have. Or you could say the brain's doing it. Okay, I'm not even going to go there. That really opens up a can of worms. Okay, the point is, in direct experience, what's going on here? This thing is rotating. Let's just leave it at that. That's it, right? And that can be a model or a practice as well. But let's think about this a little bit more. Let's think about when I lift this pen up and put it back down, or it's being lifted, or whatever's going on here, right? Could this happen? And look closely. Could this happen if the pen weren't here in this moment, right? Let's try it. You say, yeah, it does. But does it? Where'd the pen? There's no pen here. Before it was lifting the pen. Now it's not lifting anything except the bones and tendons in my arm. Right? Let's try that again. With the pen, it does it just fine. Without the pen, can't do it. All right. So right now in this moment, there's a lot going on in this moment. But it couldn't happen without each one of you with this beautiful artwork on the walls here. Couldn't happen without each speck of dust exactly where it is, or it wouldn't be this moment. Everything is completely mutually dependent on everything else. And that's an intimate relationship, and it's a seamless relationship. And again, this is where words fail, but it's not me having this relationship experience. In a way it is. I wouldn't say that it's not that, but that's not the whole thing. Okay. So anyway, the final thing I'll just say is about this pen thing is what would happen after the pen dies? Would I still exist? Or what happens after I die? Will the pen still exist? Right? In this moment, if I die, is there still going to be a pen? If the pen dies, and how would even a pen die? You know? How would I die? How would I die? Or how is it that I live, if I even do, right? Just some things to think about from a non-thinking standpoint, a not knowing standpoint. So we're not really thinking about it, we're just experiencing these things. But that's actually kind of grammar school stuff compared to some of the stuff that I want to talk to that is very, very applied also in our life, okay? And that has to do with, the third patriarch said that we don't need to seek after the truth, just cease to cherish these precious opinions we have, these precious beliefs, these things we know, okay? Just let that stuff go. That's what we do. We don't have to seek after the truth, okay? But we all have opinions, and we all have beliefs, and we all have things we think we know. And some of the things we don't hold on to very tightly, like who is the best athlete that ever lived? You know, I remember my dad talking about, well, Jesse Owens, you'd say, or something, right? And we all have opinions on this stuff. And actually, people do get in arguments and even fights over goofy things like that. But in his case, it was just a kind of a fun conversation. But then other things we'll tend to grip more tightly, like which is a better economic system? Democratic socialism, authoritarian socialism, capitalism, communism? What's the best? And we'll go to war over that stuff. That seems like a really big deal. Again, it's just a belief, you know, just a belief like that this pen's turning on its own, or my fingers are turning the pen. Just doesn't reflect reality. None of that does. Okay. So what about beliefs that are even more subtle than that, though? Beliefs like I exist. Most folks don't pay much attention to that at all, and they would just hardly even consider that a belief. But their beliefs, they're even more subtle than that. And there's a well-known story about Thich Nhat Hanh going out with a group of kids, and they're in the woods, and they see a flower. And one of the children says, "Hey, teacher, what's the color of that flower?" And he says, "It's the color that you see. It's the color that you see." So here he is trying to get them to move into raw, direct experience rather than conceptualization. The flower color is whatever it is, regardless of what we name it, right? We get in trouble when we start seeing this as a pen, but really it's just whatever it is, okay? At the same time, it's useful to be able to do some of these things and describe things in some way that we can communicate. Okay, so, but let's look at some beliefs that get in the way of direct experience, that get in the way of not knowing, that get in the way of intimacy. Because again, that's what we're talking about here, is having an intimate life, right? How that happens. And that's something called core beliefs, core beliefs. And core beliefs are something that we picked up on as children. Everybody's got some kind of core belief, pretty much. Most of us have several core beliefs, but we probably have one that's pretty particularly important. And it could be different. It could be that I'm a perfectionist, or I suck at math, or I'm a terrible person, or I'm an incredible person, or I'm not worthy. Could be any number of things. I'm not good enough. That's a real common, right? All those are core beliefs. And the thing about core beliefs that makes it graduate school compared to whatever you think about this pen, is these core beliefs can steal the freedom of your life. They can take you out of what's really going on here. And they can get you off into some preconceptions that you have about yourself, right? They can do that. But the trouble is, most of us don't even know what our core belief is. And it filters everything, including our Zen practice, if we don't begin to have it surface. And later we'll talk about Great Heart Way, and we'll talk about how that can help with core beliefs. And if I somehow forget to do that, somebody wave, because I want to talk about that for sure. But a core belief is that I don't know that I do know. That's the way I describe it. I don't know that I do know. What does that mean? Well, it means I'm really not aware that I have a feeling that I know something here. And I'm going to use me as an example. One of my core beliefs, I've certainly got more than one, but one of my core beliefs is it's a matter that I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving, probably, if I put a finer edge on it. I'm really not deserving. Okay. And that filtered and had filtered in my life, my experience incredibly. It stole the freedom of my expression and being who I was. Absolutely stole it. And what was the trade-off I got? I got an identity. I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving. It was something I could hold on to. And I definitely held on to it. And let me give you just an example of that in my life. It's a trivial example, you'll say, but it wasn't trivial to me when I was a freshman in high school. And that was, I played basketball. And I was no great shakes as a basketball player, but at the high school level, I was reasonably good. I was a really good shooter. And I couldn't jump over a deck of cards, but I was a really good shooter, okay? So when I played in high school, I was put in the position of being a point guard, person that brings the ball up the court, right? Kind of manage the game, run the plays, that sort of thing, okay? It's a responsible position. Every position is really important, but point guard is certainly important. So in practice, I looked pretty good, and I was the best shot on the team and blah, 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 this stuff. But I didn't realize that I had this core belief that I was not worthy, I was not deserving. But it showed up, and it had showed up, I'm sure, in my life in countless ways before that. But this really brought it to head. I get out in the court, the first game. Brown, you get in there. You play point. Losi, you're the shooting guard. Blah blah blah. This guy barking off instruction to it. So I get the ball. I'm nervous as heck going in there. So what did I do? I go in there, and the first thing I did, instead of dribbling the ball, taking it out to the court, which is what I'm supposed to do as point guard, and then manage the plays, I passed it back to my buddy Losi, and And he's looking at me like, what the heck are you doing? And then I ran all the way down the court and I basically hid in the corner of the gymnasium. It was a big gymnasium. So and then I just started looking like, Losi, do something. I don't know what to do. Everything went out the window. I couldn't do anything except that. So my dad's at the game, and this went on for like a couple of quarters. Of course, they pulled me out of it. But I got a chance to get back in the game for whatever reason. And my dad, who ordinarily was not like, he said, Kent, what the heck are you doing? Get your head in the game, man. And he did that in public, and you could hear him, right? You could hear him. And he didn't yell at me much in my life. I don't recall, but he did then. And I was so, pardon my Southern accent, pissed, okay, that I just got, all of a sudden, all this energy went through me, and like, I'll show him. I don't know what I'm doing. I started stealing the ball. I started making laps, and I scored about 20 points, I guess, in a relatively short period of time. Okay. I lost all that in trepidation, and I was just directly experiencing stuff. Right. So then the next week we've had another game. What do you think happened next week? Go back out again. They're expecting big things from me. I did the same thing. Went into the same deal. I didn't know what was going on, but I still couldn't, it was just deer in the headlights, this, that, whatever. I eventually got, a little bit better, but I was never able to really play up to my capability, and I didn't stay with it. I just played pickup basketball after that, which was fun anyway. That was fun, but anyway, but that's just a basketball game, ones that, who cares? But it was indicative of how much it affected the way I looked at things and the way I saw myself. But I didn't know that was it. But it was a freedom robber for sure. It was a freedom robber for sure. And going back to that koan about not knowing, right? That idea of, instead of knowing and having preconceived things, my core belief was really tricky because I didn't know I had that belief about myself. I just kind of thought I wasn't worthy and I wasn't deserving, but I didn't really get that was going on. That was just what I thought I was. And I just did things that way and tried to live up to being not worthy and not being deserving, right? Didn't know it. It's hard to work with that. It's even hard in Zen practice to work with that. Really hard. But that's why I want to talk a little bit about Great Heart too. And some of you have done the Great Heart practice. And it's not magical. It's not just like, okay, I do it and now I'm going to all of a sudden be the most, integrated Maslowian person around. It's not going to be like that. But it's very powerful. And you say, well, how can you work with a core belief when you don't even know you have that belief? And that's a fair question. But in my case, I had uneasiness. I had anxiety. I had trepidation about stuff, even stuff that I was probably pretty reasonably capable with, right? I let that get into everything and affect the way I looked at things. I'm a very introverted person by nature. I'm much more comfortable by myself or with a small group than I am with a big group, right? But this took that being introverted to a whole nother level, okay? Because the way that lack of being deserving or whatever, I don't put the spotlight on me, do anybody else. I felt much more comfortable and that kind of thing. But with Great Heart, I can feel those feelings I could get in touch with. And I wasn't feeling much before I started my Zen practice. I thought I was. I'd tell people, oh yeah, I cry in movies. Well, I did cry in movies, but sometimes, but I wasn't really feeling other types of things in my life, in my daily life, right? I was really caught up in my concepts. And the really most powerful concept was this thing of not being worthy or not being deserving, right? So it clouded everything else. I had glasses on that filtered out other things that were really going around me. Like I say, I was missing out on really being the freedom of my life. But with Great Heart, as I began to just in my practice experience feelings off the cushion every bit as much as on the cushion, really important to do that. And it was really hard, and it still is really hard. Sometimes it felt like my skin was being ripped off or something, right? Just feeling it, not running away from it, not trying to do something else that would take my mind off it. Like one of the things I really love to do is run. I still love to do all kinds of things outdoors. But I would, in certain cases, have myself not do something like that to get out of the misery. I just feel it really feel it to my bones. And I didn't real, and the hard thing for me was to not have an agenda about it. Oh, I'm doing this so I won't be miserable anymore. Well, it was like when Mui was talking, a couple of days ago about enlightenment. It's okay to want enlightenment. Well, it's okay for me to want to get out of my misery, but I did find that if I focused on that wasn't very helpful, because then I started, seeking after this, seeking after being someone that didn't have these kind of feelings going through my body, and I didn't even really understand what it was coming from yet. So I went through quite a period of practice, and still am in it, where I feel things deeply and don't certainly always, have a light go off and, oh, that's probably tied to blah, 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 kind of a concept or something. So worst case is I did great heart and I get more in touch with my feelings, and I didn't conceptualize them. I'm not sure that's so bad. It was more in the not knowing, right? But then I will say, at some point, there was a concept that popped up there. And it was this concept of, I do not like the spotlight. Okay, that's not something I'm comfortable with. Now, for whatever, the great heart and the Zen practice and all that has obviously had an impact on me, or I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be giving this talk. I wouldn't have stayed. I would not have stayed with this. So it absolutely has, and it's important. And I always try to mention a little bit about great heart, because I think it's undervalued, understated as far as in the Zen community. Because if there's somebody that's really suffering in some of these ways, and I certainly was in that category and still struggle with it, it's really important. And it's really intimate. And even this core belief of I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving, if I really get into the feelings, right, that's really intimate. That's really not knowing. But if I sit back and go, man, I wish I were better at parties. I get so nervous and all this. And man, anything I do, and God knows what's going to happen when I do this Dharma talk today. Ooh, that could be really, if I do that, that's miserable. But if I'm just with the feelings, okay, I'm just with the feelings, right? That's it. And that's intimate. And that's not an issue. That's not a problem for him. Okay. By the way, some of you may be familiar, but I enjoyed reading his book, Mingyur Rinpoche, and he talks about when he was designated to be a very kind of high-ranking person in the Tibetan Buddhist community. And as a young kid, he had these panic attacks when he'd sit. His dad was an incredible meditation teacher in the tradition, and worked with them. And it was this idea of just let the panic be there. You don't have to eradicate it, because for a long period of time, he tried to get rid of the panic. He'd sit in a group, or he'd be in their version of a sesshin, and he'd freak out. He'd have to leave. They'd make him leave. And here he was designated. He was going to be some real hotshot Tibetan teacher, right? And yet he couldn't even stay in the meditation rooms. And then eventually he got it from his dad, who was this apparently wonderful instructor about meditation, and just said, don't push it away. Let it be there. It can be there. And he did that. And then over time, it vanished. And then you know what happened? He said he felt really sad. That's how intimate he was with the feelings associated with his panic attacks. He felt really sad because he had sat with that and had that be part of him for so long. And then he had to let that go. And he said it never came back. So let's go back to this idea about the not knowing that Hogan talked about, and this not knowing that's so intimate. And I raised the question before: is this the opposite of knowing? Is it the opposite of knowing? Well, like a lot of things in our practice, I mean, you can't. It's not something we can conceptualize and just say, okay, it's the opposite of knowing. And in fact, Nagarjuna, I'm sure a number of you have read Nagarjuna, he talks about this idea of a tetralemma, not a dilemma, not it's either this way or that way, but a tetralemma. And he says, like it could be knowing, it could be not knowing, it could be both knowing and not knowing, it could be neither knowing or not knowing. And you can do that with anything. This mug, this pen, those goofy questions I was asking before, you could run that through the tetralemma and kind of see where that lands. But then it goes a step further. None of the aspects of the tetralemma will capture it, and they never will. I'm no expert on Nagarjuna, but don't know. It's made an impression on me when I read this, okay? But none of it captures it. None of it captures it, because then we're left with a scintilla of a concept that we want. We want it so much, right? I do. I've so often wanted to be able to, I hear inspirational talk or something, and I want something to hang on to. Oh, wow, that would be so awesome. The awakening experience you had, or how calm you seem, or how lucid you seem, how clear-eyed you are, all these kind of things, right? And it's like, yeah, give me some of that. But that's what being pointed at here is not that. It's this idea of something ungraspable, no square inch to land on or walk on or stand on. Nothing at all to hold on to. Nothing at all that we can really hold on to. That kind of non-knowing. And even that, I'm concretizing it. So I go back to my sitting experience with that fast friend after 1 week of session, and then think about that koan number 20. Think about how we were sitting for a week to the best of our ability. He was, I think, a pretty green Zen student as well, in kind of a not knowing situation, in a fairly non-conceptual thing, just sitting on our butts for a week, right? And so really not too surprising at the end of that we would have this feeling of connection, right? This connection, this intimacy, arguably a connectionless connection, right? Just this real intimate thing. So whatever, if I had to put a conceptual label on it and try to explain it, which I probably shouldn't even be doing, but I just did, I think that might have had something about what was going on with my newfound friend and myself there. It was just, we'd been together and not knowing, and sitting in that not knowing for that whole week. We had I'm going to use another term, we had another kind of knowing, like big knowing, an experience of a real closeness, kinship, seamlessness sort of, with each other, but certainly had an intimacy there. And I see that all the time, in our practice here. I feel intimate with all of you. I feel intimate with you, people here that I haven't really spent much time with at all. And I feel intimate with people in this virtual telecast, right? I can see folks, right now on the screen. And there's an intimacy there too. And there's an intimacy when we close that computer off, right? Still have that intimacy with people that I practiced with for some period of time. Really, really something. Really something. And let's go back to those vexing kind of questions. And Steve Hagen, who's he was a successor to Katagiri Roshi. He talks about these vexing questions like, what's the meaning of life and what happens after we die, all this stuff, blah, 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 all those kind of things like that. And he says that as we get more into, and I'm paraphrasing here, more into not knowing, more into this direct perceptual experience without analyzing, concretizing, all that sort of thing. As we do that more and more, some of life's vexing questions don't seem so vexing anymore. And he gives an example of flat Earth, believers in flat Earth. Okay. Of course, actually, it's having a comeback now. I was just reading recently. It is. I mean, it's kind of popular. There's a pretty significant amount of the population. I forget the percentage, but it's high. I'm going to say maybe 30% or so that believe in the United States now that do. So anyway, so it's picking up steam. So who knows? I'm open to it, but I don't play one way or the other. But anyway, he was talking about flat earthers back in the 14th and 13th century, and then it was quite believable. People assumed that the Earth was flat. So imagine we went back to the 13th century, the 14th century, and this flat earther asked me, I'm living then back then, but I know what I know now. I've had the experience of what I know now. And they say, Yugen, I'm troubled because I've got this question, and it's so all encompassing. And it's like, I don't understand the earth. And like, if I were to just keep walking on and on and on, is it never going to end? Or if I keep walking, am I to just drop off the end of the earth, right? Now, if I heard that question, it's not going to cause me too much trouble in my life. I'm not going to be too worried about it because, you know, I believe that the world is round or pear-shaped or whatever. And I've seen pictures, and I've been out on boats before and seen things disappear over the horizon and come back over the horizon. There's a lot of stuff. Okay. Anyway, I'm not trying to prove it. If anybody out there is a flat earther, hey, go for it. But the point is, in our practice, as we move more and more into direct experience and move less, get out of our heads, right? Get out of our heads more and more, then we begin to have a different kind of knowing, a different kind of knowing of what's going on here, what's going on in this moment, right? This ever-changing moment right here, okay? And some of the things, like I work in hospice, so I'm around people at the end of their life all the time, and they do what's called life review. It's not everyone does it at the end of life, but people that are still able to communicate and things, they'll do that. And probably a lot of people that aren't are doing that internally, when I'm not even aware of. But they'll ask themselves a question, they'll review their life, and they'll kind of evaluate, did I live this life well? You know, was it worthy of this incredible gift I had of life? Maybe if they think that way. Okay. And so that kind of life review, well, it doesn't always come out happy in their evaluation. Sometimes they have things that they did that they feel really bad about. Jim was in a group that we had for a year called Year to Live. And we pretended that it was open to anyone, whether you were very ill or healthy, but we acted out for a year as if we only had a year to live, okay? As a year to live. And we might have only had a year to live. Everybody did live throughout the year, but we all had loss. Several of us had close people who died during the year. So it wasn't, it was very real. It was very real. So this idea, though, of as we practice more and we move more and more into this directness, this seamlessness, more and more of the time, raw experience, some of these things, these philosophical questions don't seem so gripping, these existential questions. And I took philosophy in school. I didn't major, but I took some philosophy, and I found it very interesting. But some of that stuff it's not quite as interesting now, you know, because it's too much fun, as my pen taught me, to just doing this. Isn't that awesome? I mean, we really don't know what that is, what's going on there. It is incredible. And I'll concretize it and say it's a miracle, but I don't know what else to say. It is amazing that this can happen. And it's also amazing all of you are here, and we all came together. A lot of other stuff you could be doing right now. So thank you all so much for being here.